Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all well today. I wanted to give you some good news for the weekend. Now, as we're all very aware, the BBC has been struggling a bit recently, all very much self-inflicted, of course, but with, as we've documented on the podcast quite thoroughly at this point, everything involving what they did with splicing together that footage of Donald Trump on January 6th, insinuating that he called for revolution and violence, and obviously, hopefully, the big payout that Trump will get from the BBC with that. Something that is very, very good is the fact that, really, irrespective of the way that that whole fallout with Trump goes, the BBC, economically, in its funding, is still really kind of in dire straits. Now, if we look here, we can see that the license fee revenues for 2024 were at 3.7 billion. Now, this is obviously a lot of money, but it is also the bulk of the BBC's funding. And this, as it says here, comes from the license fee revenues. So these households across Britain, something approximating 23 million households in Britain paying the license fee, at the price of £179 a year. So it's a good deal of money. Now, obviously, The Guardian would say that's fantastic value. We here on the more patriotic side would say I wouldn't give up a single pence to being propagandized and basically told that we're bad people and forced multiculturalism down our throats on every single program and piece of news service. For me, I really want to basically defund the BBC. And what's more as well, the BBC is one of those examples of the old Imperial legacy, right? Because at the time when the BBC was created, it was an institution and instrument of empire. It was a respectable state-based broadcasting company from Britain in which to convey news to the colonies and to the households of Britain, and do it obviously from a neutral, supposedly neutral perspective that's quite simply just hasn't endured for all of my lifetime. And as we have many examples, but it get too off track, many decades beyond that as well. So 3.7 billion is a lot, but also many millions come to the BBC from the donors as well, corporate donors. You can see here that the European Commission gives the BBC a great deal of money, as well as US aid as well, though I'm not entirely certain how out of date that particular information is, given, of course, what happened recently earlier on this year with Washington cutting a lot of the US aid across the board. And so we'll see how that actually develops. But a lot of these, and just to add as well, money is also sent from the to the BBC from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as well, some many millions every year. So that's not particularly good. Now, this is not necessarily something that goes to the news service, to the domestic broadcasting service, nor to the actual cultural section of the BBC. It goes to something called the BBC Media Fund, which contributes to a lot of the international work that the BBC do, and is therefore seen as, by the establishment, a great asset to the quote-unquote soft power of Britain around the world. Again, very much a hang-up of the idea that actually Britain must always be some grand global influence, even if it is just pumping these countries with all of the liberal presuppositions that currently cripple us on our own continent. And so this is a lot of money that is, of course, going from both the license fee and, of course, the donors. However, as I say, most of it is from the license fee. And the very, very good news is that actually the BBC is hemorrhaging money, absolutely hemorrhaging it. As you can see here from the Telegraph just today, the BBC has lost £1 billion as more viewers cancel the TV license fee. So, sorry, my maths is a little bit off, somewhere between a third and a quarter, a huge portion of the money that the BBC gets has basically been dried up by people refusing to pay the license fee. And what's more as well, the sweet beauty of this is actually there's not really a great deal of power that the BBC has to enforce this. Now, many people around Britain will tell you about the letters that they have had, basically telling them that they can expect a knock at the door and a stern word, telling them to either pay up or be reprimanded for it and be prosecuted. But ultimately, if you don't let them in, they can't come in. And what's more as well, even though it says here that visits to unlicensed homes in 24 to 25 increased by 50%, it's still not a great deal of people, right? There are only so many individuals that you can send out to homes up and down the country to obviously try and enforce this. And if they're not letting you in, it says here, 1 in 8 users now evade payments despite using the BBC, and it's costing the corporation £550 million. And this whole trajectory is only really going in one direction, and it's obviously very much associated with for the chief part, the standard of programs that you get on the BBC these days, ever sliding further and further away from the old glories of the past. We're a long way from Kenneth Clark's Civilizations, let's just put it that way. And so this seems to be something of a trajectory that the BBC isn't really going to be able to recover from. Now, obviously, we're coming up to the end of its charter, its royal charter, given for the century that it had from 1927 to 2027. And when that goes, we don't really know what's going to happen, but it's obvious that if the BBC wants to survive, and of course it's clear that the BBC themselves very much do, and why wouldn't they, especially when they consider themselves such formidable champions for basically the liberal establishment, and they see their entire existence as a moral mandate to propagandize you. They're not going to give that up. They're not going to go gently into that good night. And so we'll have to see how things develop. But ultimately as well, it's further damaged by the fact that you can't really go a month without some great scandal coming from the BBC. Now, obviously, the Trump thing was the big thing of this particular month, but here we are now coming towards the tail end of it as well. And you have shows like Strictly Come Dancing, which are generally like the more wholesome aspects. It's just a competition where celebrities go on with professional dancers, and obviously they compete with one another. I think in this particular year, Thomas Skinner, absolute patriot, Boschman, was on it, but was quickly done away with in the first week. But nonetheless, as you can see here, allegations that one of the professional dancers basically forced himself on someone else. Now, there's not a name attached to this for obvious reasons, and obviously there's an ongoing investigation. But as Sky point out as well, this is not the first time this has happened. In fact, it happened again. It happened previously, very recently as well. And so the reputation of the BBC is absolutely in the gutter. But that doesn't matter to them, right? They can survive on a bad reputation so long as they keep the money going in. Because really, it's not about money, it's about sending a message. And the message is far more important than their popularity. But it all seems to be in freefall right now. And I'm not confident that the Labour government are smart enough to save their chief arm of propaganda. And we can only hope that, regardless of what they do with it, that if reform come in 2029, then hopefully, at long last, they can deal it, they can give it the double tap